another sad day in America.
Painful to be introduced to George Floyd during his last breath with a cop's knee on his neck. He deserved so much more.
How many black lives have to be taken before something is done?
We are not a threat.
I am shaking as I type.
This has got to stop.
We are sick of it.
Conviction.
I just want us all to live.
Death will not stop until the powers that be are finally held accountable.
Don't look away from the truth until every one of us are free from white supremacy.
The world stands with you.
Criminalizing and killing of black and brown bodies is not new. It's as old as America. It's just getting filmed more.
Do you know what it feels like to be hunted? To have a new hashtag for a dead black person every single day? How does one plan a life if they aren't sure they will have a life to plan? Trayvon,
Armstrong, Deborah Daniels,
Megan
Michelle Lee
George Floyd. His name was George Floyd. Say his name. Say his name.
George Floyd. Say his name.
Say their names.
Once again, and always, we fight for justice.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Rest in power, beautiful. You didn't deserve this.
This is Brian Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Wrap. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Wrap, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
Your ad could be ran here. MyJBN.com/support. MyJBN.com/support for more information.
Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College.
YT Productions.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah, man. I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. And you gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, boy, you gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, yeah. We represent that SWAC, that MEAC, and let me say, what's up to Tennessee, stay, and tune into the HBCU Sports Lab with Dr. Bill.
Welcome to all the lab. This is Dr. Cavil inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Standing in for Mike Washington is none other than Carlos Brown, the Carlos Brown of the Carlos Brown Show. Welcome, Carlos. How are you doing today?
I appreciate the invite. I'm doing very well. Feeling really good, and I wonder why.
Yeah, we'll get into that. I figured we get
Welcome in, Carlos.
He gonna start it off right today.
Hey, I see. Let's get it started right.
I said I was feeling good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome to episode 124 of Inside HBCU Radio Lab Show and Podcast, the show that's covering the sporting HBCU dash for all things HBCU sports for institutions large and small, from the NAIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, the HBCU athletic aesthetics, to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs and the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. And as we said, we have Carlos Brown sitting in for Mike Washington as he's still on assignment. We're filming from our home studio and sending a signal live to our KSOH 430 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer, Ralph Cooper, in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. Today's episode of Inside HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THG Agency, LLC. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. Today's show will be a good one as we continue discussing the latest of HBCU sports. As always, later on the show, we'll be discussing the Black College World Series. Yes, I said that. What? Black College World Series. We'll tell you a little more about that. It was organized by Erwin Prentiss Hill, Executive Director of BCSG 360, a 501c3 organization which is a global advocate of historically Black colleges and universities and the experiences associated with HBCUs. We've had him on a couple of times, but he got breaking news, good news. He said he'd come back, so we give it to him. So just wanted to do that. Charles, how you doing?
The hangover is over. I've moved on to the next week. It was a rough weekend for me, but to the victor go the spoils. You take your hat off to the Southern Jaguars. It was a dominating performance. It was, if you're a Southern fan, it couldn't have been a better day. Sun-swept day in Jackson, and you beat a rival. So take your hat off. Congratulations, Southern.
Oh, no doubt about it. You got to give them a lot of credit in terms of what's going on there. Let me get a shout out before I go back to Carlos and see his thoughts on some of the HBCU news of the day as we get it going. Let me give a shout out to Sarah Beverly, Willis Mack, Alan Bozeman, Quentin Henry. Kay Johnson is always in the house showing us love.
Yay!
Chuck Hunt from Monroe, Louisiana, always with a lot of love, giving us all you need. Jarvis Austin is in the house. Ricky Burton has showed up. Wendell Davis, that's brother Wendell Davis. Ada Gamma in the house. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Brother Byron Gauthier is in the house. Boy, I tell you, man, the brother's showing up, showing me much love. I appreciate y'all, gentlemen. James Bryant coming in the house. I see it. I see it. Yeah, we deep today already. Giving a shout out on a couple of folks. We'll come back to you and get some more. Herbert Bolden's in here. Make sure we give him some love. Russ Russie says, welcome, Mr. Carlos. You got the folks out here talking about welcome, boy. You must know what you're doing. Jerome Jeep Sutton in the house. Rattler's checking in. I got to give him an update on some stuff on some HBCU band. Jerome's been giving me some information in terms of the top bands, and I told him I was showing some love in regards to that because I thought he had some great information. Let me see if I can make sure I can go ahead and share it as we've been running into the show. So let's see what we got here from this brother. He said, HBCU bands have been doing great things during the pandemic season to keep their culture alive. Show them some love on the show this week. No doubt about it. His top five. Maybe we can get in some conversation with this. His top five. So everybody give me your top five, top three at least. He has at number 5, Alabama State. The Hornets sound and look impressive at their home game. Number 4, Grambling. The Tigers performed before the presidential inauguration and the NBA All-Star game. No doubt about it. Great point. Number 3, Southern. The human jukebox, enough said. Wow, that's nice when you ain't got to say nothing. You just say enough said. Number 2, FAMU. From the announcement of the move to the SWAC to the LeBron deal, all have aided new life in the Marching 100. Number 1, Charles, you might be excited about this one. I saw you give you. They have Jackson State. They have become prime time because of the addition of Deion Sanders. Let me know what you think. All right, everybody, let us know top 5. Better be glad Mike Washington out here. You know he's. So let me show him some love. But great information there, Mr. Jerome Jeep Sutton. Thank you for sharing that, giving us some good topics to get off with. With that, let's get into some hot news. Charles, what do you have for us today?
Sure, let's start on the HBCU sports business end as Deion Sanders, and this is an article here in the HBCU game, they had a hand in SWAC's Pepsi deal, but Pepsi and the SWAC have reached an agreement that will make the soft drink company the official beverage sponsor for basketball and football championship games. It's a 3-year deal and part of the company's initiative titled Racial Equity Journey. And this is a quote from Derek Lewis, who's the president of the South Division of PepsiCo Beverages in North America. Sports are integral to Pepsi's DNA, and we're honored to join the SWAC as main beverage partners. Pepsi sponsorship of the SWAC represents a substantial increase in market share for the brand in a region previously held by a competitor. Signage, naming highlights include in PBNA's corporate and presenting sponsorships of the 2020 through 2023 SWAC football championship, as well as the 2020 through 2023 men's and women's basketball tournament, include a comprehensive suite of brand opportunities, exclusivity across beverage categories, logo displays on the field at 50-yard lines, analog and digital logo displays, and PA mentions, cable and digital media advertising, local TV and radio, and more. So that's huge from Pepsi and the SWAC.
Yeah, switch over from Coca-Cola to Pepsi. It must be good. I've talked to Dr. Charles McClellan about this deal, and they had some stuff in the works. And then there's actually going to be a separate type of package with Deion, with his continued partnership, and what SWAC was able to negotiate, and bringing those together makes it that much bigger when you think about it. And you're talking about the partnership with students of the SWAC member schools. Now there'll be 12 of them, obviously, starting in 2021. That is significant too. And it's interesting. I helped negotiate a deal between the SWAC with Toyota in a way that created that pathway, which you start seeing a lot more corporations not only looking in terms of the financial side of what they're giving the SWAC, but also in terms of a more robust partnership in terms of student involvement. So I'm really excited to happy to see that. With that, let me go to Carlos and see what type of news that he wants to get off his chest and share with us today.
Well, I would say it was a tremendous opportunity with the deal with Pepsi, with the involvement of students and, your brand. Now you're continuing to expand on your marketing brand. It's an excellent opportunity, and kudos to Pepsi and the Southwestern Athletic Conference.
No doubt about it. Some other news that you want to share today?
Well, I know we're going to get into the game of the week last week with Southern and Jackson State.
Jump right into it, Carlos.
Well, I had major concerns going into the ball game, and of course, I have been very tough on Coach Odoms and Southern University. But when you love, it's tough love. Let me make that perfectly clear. But they were able to come out. I thought Coach Odoms and the staff had an excellent game plan. They were able to be dominant in the run game. And, of course, Skelton had a few hiccups, but on that first drive, it set the tone where they were able to go down and score. And then defensively, you held Jackson State to 66 yards rushing. That is a major accomplishment because, Jackson State offensively and Southern, they kind of mirror each other to me, and basically making them one-dimensional. Now, Jalen Jones with over 200 yards throwing the football, but Southern defensively, mind you, that one explosive play that they gave up for about 75 yards, they were able to keep the explosive plays at a minimum. But time of possession, and then Baharas, who really had his personal best, a 49-yard field goal, also a 30-yard field goal, and then you look at special teams, blocking a punt, setting up a touchdown. They were able to accomplish what they set out to do, and that was run the football, eat up the time of possession, stop explosive plays, eliminate them, and win the special teams aspect of the game. So hats off to Coach Odoms and their staff. And John Lampley came in and I thought did a tremendous job running the offense. So it was a great performance.
No doubt about it. Since we jumping right into it, Charles, did you want to retort or you want to get on to some other news?
Oh, I would love to get on to some other news, but let me retort. It was a tremendous performance by Southern. Like I said, you take your hat off to them. I thought that, Coach Sanders, he talked about it in the postgame presser that, out of the things that he preaches, smart, tough, fast, discipline, they were lacking in 3 out of the 4 things that he wants to see out there. So that's something to look at going forward. Southern was just a way more physical ball club on Saturday. And like you said, Carlos, making Jackson State one-dimensional in terms of not allowing that running game to get going. And that puts more pressure on Jalen Jones, unfortunately. He already was a little dinged up coming into that game. And, again, the lion's share of the offense had to go through him. So that's just something that they're going to have to be cognizant of moving forward. I think they made a quarterback change today because I think Jalen is still kind of dinged up, so that limits his effectiveness. But it should be a good matchup, at least with Alabama A&M this weekend. I said Sunday, styles make fights, and I think the past 2 games, Jackson State playing Alabama State and Southern, I just thought those teams were just more physical than them up front. They got beat up front. So until that turns around, it's just going to be a process to try to get yourself back into the SWAC elite.
Great point when you both of y'all breaking it down in terms of what took place in that game. A lot going on, and as you said, quarterback change for Jackson State. That tells you a lot in terms of that game, whether it's due to ineffectiveness or injury or a combination of both. You just see what took place in that game and that matchup. We'll talk a little more about the other matchup as we really get into it on Thursday, more in terms of football, but we might tease it out. We'll get on the second half of the show. We'll talk a little bit more baseball because the race is tightening up in the West. But let me give a shout out before we go to our guests. BJ Jones, say what's up, fella. Norwood Bird, Fred Whitted is in the house from HBCU Heritage Center. Keith Martin giving it. Mo Carter's up in the house. He's been on guest here, giving us some love. I don't know how we find all these Southern guys come on here, but credit to them. I don't know. I got to figure that one out, how I made those kind of decisions. I don't know, Charles. You got to help me out there. Stephen A. Miller, but much love to those guys. They deserve it. They bring it, and they cover HBCU sports like no one else. Demetrius Gatewood, a minor, is in the house as he's getting it done, working on his master's, just finishing his master's, as he's telling me, as he's coming to conclusion. I'm so proud of him. Former student of mine at Texas Southern University. Getting it done as he finishes his degree there, previous at Jackson State and Southern. So he knows much about the SWAC as he's getting done. Wendy Jenkins Bishop, the better half, got to make sure we show love to that sister right there. Dwight Moore says enough said. Number 3, Steve Harvey versus SVOTS. Yeah, that was a big in terms of the verses, boy. That was significant. I got a lot of love out of that. Willie Alex Hine in here. With that, let's go to our guests as we bring on none other than Erwin Hill. As you may or may not heard, it's big. He told you he had big news, and we found out what that big news was. BCSG 360 and Black College 9 team up to create baseball's first Black College World Series. Let me say it again. Black College 9, BCSG 360 team up for baseball's first Black College World Series. A new chapter in the legacy of HBCUs is here. The inaugural series will feature 8 HBCU baseball teams made up 4 from the NCAA, Division II, and 4 from the NAIA, as you may not know. I'm going to let him talk a little bit about the particulars. The game itself is April 28th, May 1st at this point, in terms of the next chapter, as we see what is going on in HBCU baseball for the small division, as we talk about. But big news here. We got him here live, so he can tell you everything you need to know. How's it going, Mr. Hill?
It's going great, man. How you guys doing this evening?
Man, we're going well. long as we get to talk about HBCU sports, you know, life is pretty good. You ask me.
I can dig it.
Thank you. So tell us, to some degree, how did this come together? Because this is big when you talk about two different associations coming together. So you got the guidelines and rules from the NCAA Division II, NAIA, the way that you were able to pull that together. You got institutions that you got to come together that are dedicated to playing this. You got two organizations, Black College 9, BCSG. You pulled off these other classics, but now you're back into it again with a little more gusto. That's pretty big news. Talk about that.
Yeah, so it's definitely a labor of love, several years in the making. I got into doing HBCU baseball classics back in 2015. So we're very proud to be celebrating a 5-year anniversary doing Black College baseball classics. And so after a couple of years of doing events, I got a phone call one day while I was driving, and I was a brother by the name of Michael Coker, who's a writer for Black College Nines. And at the time we were working on the HBCU World Series. And we just kind of developed a relationship. We had never met. As a matter of fact, we haven't met to date. We've only seen each other via teleconferencing, that sort of thing. But just two brothers working to promote HBCU baseball. He's a writer. I'm a organizer of these events, and in our conversations over the years, he expressed an interest when we first met of creating something similar to the HBCU World Series for the smaller HBCUs. And so over the years, we just kind of stayed in contact, talked about, for the most part, he's been very encouraging because what we do isn't easy. There are a lot of challenges facing Black college sports in general. But when you talk about baseball and it lacking the popularity of its counterparts being football and basketball, it's a situation where it gets lost in the shuffle. And so it being a non-revenue generating sport, it's oftentimes treated as such. And so that's one of the things that we kind of push and promote, is that our goal and our objective is to treat baseball like a revenue generating sport. And so we came up with the idea of the Diamond Classics. And the goal and the intent was always to create some postseason events in addition to the conference tournaments to build more recognition for Black college baseball. And so Mike and I just, had a conversation a couple of weeks back when the SIAC decided to cancel their season. And he was asking me some questions and pretty much baiting me down a path to say, hey, you know what, this might be the opportunity to do a postseason event for small Black colleges. Because I informed him how challenging it would be, because I knew all too well how challenging it is for the Division I programs to create a postseason event. And so everything kind of lined up. It's amazing how this pandemic has kind of worked. In some aspects, it's definitely been, a challenging ordeal for a lot of people, and fatal in some aspects to some. But it's also opened up some opportunities. It's created some, especially for HBCUs. We have been put in a position under a spotlight where we're now getting some recognition that is greatly deserved. And I hope we are going to be good stewards of these opportunities, and definitely, hopefully, create some events that people will take notice and say, hey, we definitely need more of this. And so that's what we're trying to create with the Black College World Series. I'm fortunate to have a brother like Mike. I consider him a friend over the last several years, and just always been, encouraging to what I've been doing. Just keep it up, Prentiss, is always saying, you're doing a great thing. And so because of that, man, timing just came right for it. And so we're happy to partner with the Montgomery Biscuits, City of Montgomery, and we're going to make this thing happen. So we're in the process now of reaching out to the schools that qualify to be in the selection pool. And we're going to go forward with the process of selecting these schools and putting this event together.
Let me jump in there. As you said that in the background, I'm glad you talked about the Classic, because we got some folks that may have not had a chance to see that, and they're getting a little glimpse of the game as it was carried. BCSN Network carried the game, and so they're getting a little view. So next year is coming back, and that's what I'm hearing. So a lot of people get a chance to really get involved in that beautiful facility. It was a beautiful day, weekend for baseball for that matter. I had one of my good friends there, and he said, man, you had cigar lounge for folks that had that area they want to do. And so he had a blast. He can't talk about it enough. So great job there. But in terms of the First Black College World Series, let me let Charles jump in and ask a follow-up question.
Sure. Well, one of the things I've noticed, you find some tremendous venues, and I was curious how the partnership with the city of Montgomery and the Riverwalk Stadium came about.
Great question. So we were planning about 5 or 6 events last spring, right before the pandemic put an end to the season. And so at that point, we were disappointed because we were trying to get some events in because we greatly needed to establish some events because we hadn't done what we wanted to over the last couple of years. But it gave us an opportunity to press pause. And in the process of pressing pause, there are some venues that we've been working with over the past several years, or attempting to work with, I would say. And so we said, hey, let's cast our net, across the country. And we reached out to about 15, 16 ballparks, most of which were minor league ballparks. And we were we have a formula that we use. And so part of that formula is looking for regional matchups. And then once we found some regional matchups, we wanted to identify some minor league ballparks. And pretty much most of your minor league ballparks, especially in primary and secondary markets, have fairly new facilities. Mm-hmm. And so in identifying those regional matchups, we looked at, okay, Pensacola might be a good location, Biloxi, Jacksonville, Florida, Frisco, Texas, Jackson, Mississippi, and the likes. And so we had about 15 ballparks, and we just started picking up the phone and calling. And one of the unique situations about doing that is, and that's kind of how I've established myself with athletic directors, coaches, and general managers of these minor league franchises. And so in doing that, pretty much you like saying, hey, the worst they can do is say no. And mm-hmm. So we had an opportunity. We found a unicorn, actually. And by that, I mean a gentleman by the name of Harold Craw, general manager of the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp. He's the only African-American general manager of in minor league baseball. Mm-hmm. And so quite surprising when I, went to the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp website, and here's his brother, sitting up there with his picture listed as the general manager. So it was kind of refreshing. Didn't know what to expect. Yeah. But it was a blessing because Harold is a great guy. And as soon as we pitched the idea, they loved it. They were all on board. They do a high school event that's similar. And so they pretty much helped us develop the template for partnering with minor league franchise. And so once we got that template from them, oh man, it was like a track meet. We were, just emailing different franchises and say, hey, we want to bring Black college baseball to your ballpark. Are you interested? We have some partnerships existing with a few ballparks now. Would you be interested in taking a look at what we have? And we sent that information to them. And by and large, these franchises was like, hey, let's do it. Here again, they were going through a renegotiation with Major League Baseball. And so a lot of onus and responsibility is now placed on these minor league franchises to generate revenue. And so it made the opportunity right for us to go in with some of these ideas to create some revenue generation potential outside of their regular season.
Would there be an opportunity potentially to take a look at the larger divisions doing something similar? I know there's a lag time between when the SWAC baseball championship is done and the regional start. Do you think schools would be interested in something similar?
Man, I'm always at work. I don't know why you trying to get that information out of us.
So yeah, we actually been working on that for the last couple of years, and we came very close to pulling it off in Chicago back in, I want to say 2018, and pandemic hit us the following year, and so we have something up our sleeve. We'll be making that announcement here soon, but we're going to, like I say, switch gears like we did when the pandemic hit, and go to some places where we're feeling the love, and hopefully some of these other locations that we attempted in the past, we'll understand better once we implement it in some other places what we were trying to do, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to circle back at some of those locations.
Sure thing.
Yeah, and there's also the framework and the dynamics involved in the Division I. So it'll be interesting to see how you're able to manage and play that out. With that, this is Dr. Cavil inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Sitting in for Mike Washington as he is on assignment is none other than the great Carlos Brown. We're interviewing Erwin Hill of BCSG 360 as he's talking about the first Black College World Series that will be played in April 28th, and closing out on May 1st. If you would, stick around. We're going to take a quick break. I want to get back and allow Carlos to ask a final question. So if you don't mind, Mr. Hill, if you stick around and ask that question, we're going to take a quick break right here at Dr. Bill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop.
Because the fight isn't over yet.
You will see me choose to protect my community by wearing a face cover.
And even with my face covered,
you will see me. As a son, as a man with a never quit attitude,
as a fighter for change.
Join me in wearing a face cover
to help stop the spread of the coronavirus.
Because this is one small act of kindness
that has the power to make a big difference.
Follow the Black College Sports Network on social media at MyBCSN1, the number 1, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at MyBCSN1.
Because the fight isn't over yet.
This is Dr. Bill with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is out on assignment, and sitting in is Carlos Brown as we interview Erwin Hill of BCSG 360, talking about the first Black College World Series, looking at stacking up 8 teams for the small college division, 4 teams from the NCAA Division II, and 4 teams from the NAIA. With that, as promised, I want to let Carlos jump in here and ask the question.
Congratulations, Erwin, on the Black College World Series. It's going to be a great thing. From a short-term perspective and then onto a long-term perspective, what do you believe are going to be some of the goals that you're going to try to reach in the short term and the long term?
Great question. So we have a long-term comprehensive plan. And that centers around definitely using Black college baseball as a platform to recruit and promote HBCUs to urban communities. As it relates to baseball specific, we all know that there are various challenges, limitations, lack of resources that find HBCU baseball programs in the situations that they're in. And so we want to leverage our goal and objective in the short term is just hosting great events so we can shine a light on these events. As a matter of fact, a great example, and I'll be remiss if I did not shout out BCSN for the great work that they do in streaming our games live. But our first event this year, coming out of what we were planning from over the pandemic, We had an event down in Jacksonville, the Jackson Diamond Classic. You had two small HBCU, Savannah State and Edward Waters College, and it was a great game. We had one of the great highlights of the season, I'm pretty sure, where a kid 0 for 4 for the night, bottom of the 8th, team down by a run, bases loaded, 2 outs, and grand slam home run. And so when you put Black college baseball at any level, whether it's Division I, Division II, NCAA, or NAIA, that was a matchup between an NAIA program and a Division II NCAA program. And so that to be able to capture something like that, if I told you that level of competition existed in the smaller HBCUs, you wouldn't believe me. And so because of our partnerships with BCSN to be able to stream our games live and capture this, it would just be hearsay. And so we're excited about the opportunities of showcasing the top programs and the smaller HBCUs through this event. And then we understand that there are various partnerships that exist, and we're going to showcase that there are various narratives. You have Xavier University, that's a jewel in this season. They're competing at a high level. Last year, they didn't even have a baseball program, but through a partnership with Major League Baseball and the RBI program, they brought baseball back to Xavier University. Over 60 years, I think they did not have a baseball program. And so it's very remarkable how, those type of partnerships have created stories like Xavier. And if we could, leverage those opportunities, use what we got to get what we want, I think we can, create more opportunities like the opportunity with Xavier. There are major league franchises like the Atlanta Braves that are partnered with Tuskegee University, and various RBI programs that are feeding into the likes of Kentucky State. So if we are able to create some more formal partnerships, you have a former Major League Baseball player in Torrey Hunter that was very instrumental in donating funds to do the ballpark at University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. And so we feel like we have enough to get this thing jump started, but it's definitely going to take more relationships, more resources. And so that's what our goal and objective is. Like I said, we're going to treat baseball like it's a revenue generating sport. We're going to continue to increase the regular season classics while creating programming and opportunity to go on to Black college campuses, stabilize baseball fields, create opportunities for funding for baseball stadiums and grandstands to be built so that we can not only go to the Dr. Pepper ballparks of the world or the Riverwalk stadiums of the world, but to be able to go on campus and do some of these events, get BCSN on some of these Black college campuses that have some of the better facilities right now, and utilize that to help, get other campuses up to par. So we definitely want to grow the game of baseball. In the process of it, we want to, utilize these facilities as we get these resources and access to these resources, and get youth on campus while exposing them to HBCUs and the opportunity to attend an HBCU, help them develop in the game of baseball, because at the end of the day, these HBCUs definitely need student athletes of tomorrow to be developing today. And so that creates and raises the level of competition when you have that type of opportunity. So, I mean, it is a comprehensive approach, but there's so many different ways as we can talk about that for an hour just alone. But I appreciate the question. But yeah, we have a short term, and that's take it one event at a time, one ball game at a time. And like I say, we keep chopping wood, man. Everything else fall into place.
No doubt about it. I want to thank you for your time, Erwin Hill, in regards to BCSG 360, talking about the first Black College World Series that you established. Welcome here anytime with the breaking news, and it sounds like you continue to have more things to break. So we'll see about getting you back in here to talk about the things that you're doing for HBCU programs. Again, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. This is Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Erwin Hill of BCSG 360, talking about the first Black College World Series. Coming back to you, Carlos, as we see Charles is out on assignment, so we'll get him back in here and in the mix as he gets going. But with that, wanted to share, he talked a little bit about Xavier. Boy, Xavier had a Saturday. I hadn't seen anything quite like this, and it was pretty big when you talk about that. Saturday, check this out. Softball. Xavier 8, Talladega 0, game 1. Softball. Xavier 9, Talladega 2, that was game 2. Baseball. Xavier 10, Southeastern Baptist 0, that was game 1. They had a game 2, Xavier 3, Southeastern Baptist 2. You might see a trend going on here. Men's tennis, Xavier 7, Russ 0. Women's tennis, Xavier 6, Russ 0. Man, clean sweep from all the sports, getting it done. Xavier goes to them for a big Saturday. Any thoughts on that?
Well, very impressive, to say the least. And Xavier baseball, softball, just tremendous. And, about an hour drive from where I'm at, Baton Rouge, but a lot of history with Xavier. And it's great to see them doing well across the sports program. Kudos to Xavier.
A question I have for you, just your general thoughts on this in regards to, as we get into maybe a little more baseball talk. Do you think that's going to be a positive thing in terms of Southern and Grambling have baseball programs, and now you have the NAIA program at Xavier having baseball? Do you think that would help, or do you think that would hinder in regards to that framework?
I think it's going to help, because if you look at the state of Louisiana from a collegiate baseball standpoint, you got a lot of tremendous programs in the state of Louisiana. And Xavier, to have so much success, I mean, we know about their academic success, but, from a sports perspective, they're doing very well. Dr. Cavil, I think it only helps. And with the other great programs in the state of Louisiana that they can, talk with and see how they're doing with their baseball programs, it's going to be a tremendous help. They're going to do well.
Yeah, great point. Did want to get this in, praying for the family, as Reggie Howe talks about praying for the family, and late Representative Hastings went to school at Florida A&M in 1963, and his death as he was fighting cancer, and didn't necessarily lose that battle, but his time ran out. So certainly want to say condolences to his family and appreciate Reggie Howe making sure that we got that announcement in there. Back to a little more baseball. We'll start over here a little bit in terms of the MEAC, some love. Then we'll come back into the SWAC, because it looks like Jackson State is getting it done in the East over there, but the West may be tightening up a little bit. Carlos, you know a little bit about that, what we think about the West Division. We'll let Charles celebrate over there in the East. As they, before we get into SWAC, let's make sure we spread it around. The FAMU game in North Carolina Central was called for COVID-19. We understand the protocols there. We've seen that with the last couple of weeks with Prairie View in terms of baseball, and obviously on the football side, you've probably seen a little, maybe too much of that, especially if you're Alabama A&M Bulldog. They don't want to hear anything about protocols COVID related as you deal with sports, but it is the time that we're in. Delaware State, Norfolk State split 2-2, sandwiched between the two losses for Norfolk State were 2 wins against Delaware State. First game loss was 5-2. The second and third game were wins, 5-3, 7-2 respectively. Then they lost the nail biter 2-1 to Delaware State. So they split 2, giving you a little update of what's going on over there in the MEAC in terms of baseball. It's going to be fascinating to kind of see, keep your eyes on that moving forward, because obviously with A&T leaving the conference, going to the Big South, FAMU and Bethune-Cookman leaving the conference, going through the SWAC, that's not any new news, but in terms of baseball, some people pointed out that reduces the number of teams they have. And then all of a sudden you hear the news of North Carolina Central saying they're going to cancel baseball, even though they're staying in the MEAC. So you're talking about now 4 teams. So you're well away from the minimum 6 you need in terms of baseball. So it'll be one thing we certainly need to keep our eyes on there. Well, FAMU in conference race right now is leading the way, 4-0, 10-16 overall. Central is 2-2, 10-8 overall. A&T is sitting in the third spot in the Southern Division, 2-6, as they're 4 games back. Obviously, FAMU that beat them with the Brooms, 7-21 overall. In the Northern Division, Norfolk State is sitting in 5-3 after the big wins they had this past weekend. 9-17 overall. Delaware State is 4-4, 1 game back, 6-12 overall. And Coppin State is 3-5, 2 games back at 5-13. Any thoughts in terms of the MEAC, particularly Delaware State, Norfolk State, or what FAMU is doing in terms of starting a little slow on the season, but they've had some big victories. Non-conference win against SWAC, Alabama State, which is always a good matchup. And then obviously getting the sweep over A&T is certainly something to think about. What are your thoughts on that, Charles?
The sweep over A&T, that was what raised my eyebrows with FAMU. And then, like you mentioned, the win over Alabama State, because Alabama State has been one of the top programs in the SWAC over the past several years. But kudos to Florida A&M. North Carolina A&T kind of falling back a little bit this past season. That's been a little bit surprising. But you take your hats off to FAM, especially with the sweep over a well-regarded baseball program like A&T.
Yeah. Carlos, you want to jump in there and think about the MEAC, or you want to focus more on this SWAC? I know you like to really get into that West Division, but we want to show some love to the MEAC.
Yeah, well, I'm going to show some love to FAMU, because you look at FAMU, North Carolina A&T, North Carolina Central, and it is a tragedy that they're going to disband their baseball program. But at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, you always know FAMU is going to be in the mix. And I can't wait to see FAMU and Bethune-Cookman with 2 outstanding baseball programs coming into the Southwestern Athletic Conference. You think the West is tough right now, and it's a battle going on. Just think about FAMU and Bethune-Cookman coming over to the Eastern Division. And Charles, I will say this, they will meet a formidable opponent in Coach Omar Johnson, Jackson State baseball. Boy, can't wait.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. That's going to be fun.
Jumping ahead of yourself. I agree with you. That's going to be fun. Let's get into some of this SWAC baseball as we give some love to the other sports. Before we get into that, I want to shout out North Carolina A&T State. They win the MEAC Volleyball Championship, so they'll be moving on to the tournament. We talked about Jackson State getting it done a couple of weeks ago. They draw Western Kentucky for the first round of the NCAA tournament, so that's one to keep your eyes on. SWAC announces the spring 2021 soccer tournament seeding, so fascinating, and that's down to Prairie View. So in the Houston area, if you want to go see some soccer, you can get on down there and see the women's SWAC soccer programs. Number 1 seed will face off, or Grambling enters, which is Alabama State's, and will face off against Grambling State. Well, Grambling State is actually the 2 seed. Prairie View claimed the 3 seed, I should say. 4th seed was Jackson State. 5th seed is Texas Southern, and 6th seed is Southern. 8th seed is Arkansas Pine Bluff, and finally you have the Alcorn State Braves as the 8th seed in terms of those matchups. So 1 versus 8 would be interesting to see how that goes. 2 versus 7, obviously 3 versus 6, and 4 versus 5. And 4 versus 5 is always interesting because it tends to be really close. One that you can get upsets, but soccer is one of those sports. When you start living in those goals, you can never tell what goes on. So it'll be interesting to look at what is going to go on in the SWAC tournament. Having home field advantage, we'll see what that does for Prairie View as the number 3 seed. Does it help them out any there? With that, let's get into baseball a little more. As we said, we'll dedicate Thursdays some more football matchups. We might be able to sneak a little bit of it in to make sure everybody gets their feel, because we did need to talk a little bit about that Arkansas, maybe Pine Bluff game in that matchup and what's going on there. But Eastern Division, Jackson State is pushing it. They're 12-0, so they're looking good. 18-7 overall, 4-game win streak, playing some really good baseball. Behind them is Alabama State. That shouldn't surprise anybody. They did get swept by Jackson State, but they got a rematch coming up, so it'll be interesting. It's in Jackson, so if they're going to make a move, they got to get some of these victories this weekend, or you can pretty much close it out on the Eastern Division in a lot of ways with that series. They're at 8-4, 11-13 overall. Auburn State, the Braves sit at 5-7, 5-8 overall. Alabama A&M 2-7, 2-12 overall, and Valley in the rear 0-9, 0-12 have yet to get in the winning bracket side of things. But before we get in the Western Division, any thoughts in terms of what's going on in the East, Charles?
Yeah, you take your hat off of Jackson State. I mean, they're number one in the conference in hitting 305. They're second in the conference in pitching. They're the number one fielding team in the conference. They lead the nation in stolen bases. They're getting it done all the way across the board. But I always keep my eye on the pitching. Mario Lopez, he has a 2.96 ERA. He's 2-0 on the season. Nikhil Galatas, he leads the staff. He's 4-2 thus far on the season. So he's the guy, the go-to guy that they go to. But they're getting it done with the pitching. That's something I really keep an eye on. Anthony Vessera, he has only an ERA of 3.07. He's 3-1 on the season. So pitching-wise, the question for me is, does Jackson State have the arms to overcome Alabama State? And thus far, they've been really getting the job done in terms of the pitching part. I know they're going to hit well year in, year out. When you take a look at guys like Chandler Dillard, he's batting 375. Shanar Brown is batting 403. And then, even Wesley Rice, who is, came into the season, preseason all SWAC, he hasn't gotten on track yet. So they have some firepower in terms of Jackson State hitting.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Before I go to you, Carlos, and see your thoughts on this, give a shout out to brother Kevin Crawford. I think he knows his answer, but he just wants to point out to everybody who won the last MEAC baseball championship. Obviously, they didn't have one in 2020, COVID-19. So you go back to 2019, and that would be one other than the Rattlers of Florida A&M. They got it done in 2019 in terms of winning the baseball tournament. So, yeah, they're coming over there with some hardware. A little different in the SWAC. A little different in SWAC. They will make it interesting, but you're going to fight for it over here with that going on. And then Bethune-Cookman, they're going to come up big stick too. Jackson State, Alabama State. Man, that East, man, it gets interesting over there. The West is able to brag a little bit, but I'm not so sure that the East can't stick their chest out a little bit now. But we'll see. That's 2022, I should say. But with that, Carlos, what do you think about the Eastern Division, Jackson State?
No doubt about it. Jackson State, as Charles talked about, from a historical standpoint, always can hit. Always can hit. The question has always been depth at pitching. That's settled. Alabama State usually is the team that's either first or second. So, guys, right now, the biggest question, we know who's one and we know who is number two. In the East, who will grab that third spot? And Alcorn, before the pandemic hit, I saw some improvement with their baseball team. So we know the top two teams, and we literally can say the third team is Alcorn State. With that being said, Jackson State, if you guys had to rank, say, irrespective of division, name your top three baseball teams in the Southwestern Athletic Conference so far.
Somebody says FAMU sucks. Bethune-Cookman got a real baseball team. Charles, why aren't you answering any of my phone calls? I think they might be about to be lost there. So somebody is pulling on Charles, getting it done there. With that, let's get back in here in the Western Division. When you have things tightening up. Texas Southern took 2 out of 3 from Southern. That was a big deal in terms of what was happening there. Texas Southern started out slow, lost a couple of pairs to Pine Bluff that surprised everybody, but they bounced back. Arkansas Pine Bluff had the series, and Southern was leading in their third game, looking like they might make it interesting, but Southern was able to come back and get that victory. But things have tightened up a little bit after last weekend, with Southern now at 8-4 in terms of the conference rates, 10-14 overall. Grambling at 6-3 in terms of the lost column, 1 game back, 9-14 overall in the mix. Texas Southern now at 500, 6-6, 2 games back from the top spot, 7-17 overall. Prairie View, surprising some folks, are in the mix a little bit. They're 3-4, playing a little bit better baseball as they got hit by COVID-19 protocols. So it'll be interesting to see how they're able to come back. They're just 3-11 overall, so hadn't been able to do anything outside of the conference, much like Arkansas Pine Bluff sitting at 2-8 in terms of conference, 2-17 overall. Those top 3 spots, though, pretty interesting there. You know, essentially a 2-game lead between all of them. 1 game, if you would, but Grambling in the loss column. So it'll be interesting to see what's taking place. What are your thoughts in regards to the Western Division, Carlo?
Well, I'm going to start with Texas Southern. Coach Robinson, Dr. Cavil, always in the mix. Yeah, they started low, but hey, they took 2 out from Southern University. Can you say, Dr. Cavil, maybe that is the big rivalry in baseball?
Yeah, baseball, no doubt about it. That is, and we go back. People don't understand it. Some of those that do not, I should say, follow baseball, maybe like many of the people in the SWAC do, but those that are baseball fans, this goes back the first couple of years with Rob coming in with Kadar, with Kadar, such a legendary figure in baseball, just really putting a stamp on the SWAC baseball. Rob came in with Prairie View, a team that people had literally forgot about. Built that program up, and you go to that first tournament. I'm gonna take you back a little bit, Paul. That first tournament in Birmingham, talking about Prentiss Hill there in a lot of ways. Rickwood Park, dust everything, midnight. You got game going into extra innings. They trying to decide what they're gonna call it off because it's behind some apartments, impoverished in a lot of ways. So you got gunshots. They thought it was gangs or whatever going on. Some people saying fireworks. No, that's gunshots. Everybody taking and ducking. And they like, no, we're going to get this game in. No, we're going to play it hard. So they really got into it. Southern gets it done, defeating Prairie View twice. The Prairie View came out of the winners bracket. This is after, at the end of the season, they were trying to get in the tournament the year before playing Southern, and they swept Southern. And then there was a question, how many games Grambling and Texas Southern needed to play just down the road. You got these phone calls going back and forth, whether to play the second game or not. They didn't play it, so Prairie View's left out. So there's a lot of history that people may not realize that it's really made that rivalry first, Prairie View Southern, really interesting. Prairie View comes back, gets 2 straight championships. Then the rivalry switched between Texas Southern and Prairie View, which was a slight rivalry between Southern and Texas Southern anyway for a while back. At least when it was in McGregor Park, those games were always interesting. Texas Southern upsets Prairie View. Coach Rob goes to Texas Southern, and then all of a sudden the rivalry becomes officially Texas Southern and Southern. Very fascinating in so many different ways. So I agree with you. But continue on in terms of what you want to say a little more about that.
Yeah, well, and even if you think about last year when Coach Kerry Jackson was at Southern and against Texas Southern, they were battles. I mean, how many one-run games? If you had heart problems, you would have to have taken your medicine because it left you on the edge of your seats. And you know, Grambling State, they're always going to be in the mix. And with Southern still, you know, with the transition in coaching with Coach Crenshaw, they're still trying to find their way. But you often use the word parity in the Western Division. Yeah, you could see that as far as this season, but I think it will come down to, you know, four teams basically, and even Prairie View, you know, taking 2 or 3 from Southern University. So you see improvement there. I think it goes down to at least the last week or the week before the finals in the Western Division. Very, very, very competitive.
No doubt about it. Charles, we just broke down the records of those teams in the Western Division. And talked about, as you heard a little bit about that rivalry that was Prairie View Southern, and now it's Coach Rob in Southern getting it done as he switched to Helms. Kadar's retired, changes in the coaching position at Southern. What are your thoughts in terms of the Western Division?
Well, you know, Texas Southern always makes that late season run where they get hot. So, you know, you have to keep an eye out for Coach Rob in terms of the Texas Southern seems to always be playing their best ball that last week and a half going into the SWAC tournament. So, you know, Texas Southern Grambling has a midweek win versus Jackson State. So I can't count them out. So they had a nice 9-7 victory over Jackson State. So it's going to be really interesting this upcoming season. This upcoming SWAC tournament to see who really comes out. I think when you take a look at it, I always take a look at Jackson State, Alabama State, Texas Southern, and you never know. Prairie View or Grambling might have a say-so in there somewhere.
Certainly. We're going to bleed over just a little bit since we have Carlos Brown on. I got to release the top 5 rankings for week number 6. And he is not coming back. Not that he's welcome, but he's a special guest today. So I want to make sure he gets some comments in, even though I like to tease Charles and make him sweat a little bit. I'm allowed him to get in some thoughts. With that, let me announce BCSN will release the Players of the Year, Coach of the Year, and the National Champion, the Sports Wrap show this week. So keep your eyes on that so you can get your information from the Sports Wrap show. And this is in terms of the sport of basketball, as you know, in terms of that. Men's and women's, NAIA Division II and Division I, the major division, in terms of what it looks like that. So a lot of information will be out there. So that's one to keep your eyes on in terms of what's going on there. Check it out, BCSN with the Sports Wrap with Brian and AD as they continue to give you that great news. Top 5 programs. There's a change this week. Somebody dropped out. Let's see what you think in terms of who dropped out. Receiving votes. Alabama State Hornets, 1 and 2. Tough loss to South Carolina State, 42 points. Delaware State Hornets sit at 2 and 1. And they got their second win of the season. Second time they defeated Howard. Really dominated them this time, 56 points. Receiving votes, let's give you a little hint who dropped out. Jackson State Tigers go to 3 and 2, 2 and 1, 70 points. They fall out of the top poll ranking as they drop out this week. So top 5 programs, team jumping into the top 5. South Carolina State Bulldogs sit at 2 and 1, big win over Alabama State. Doing it from a defensive side. We know they can do it. Not much on the offensive side, but they find a way to get the victories. Splitting as they are 1 and 1 against the SWAC this year. So that's interesting. 1 and 0 against Delaware State. They'll get a chance to play Delaware State again. Their games with Howard were canceled because of COVID protocol, not being able for them to come into Washington, D.C. and Howard to be able to travel down south because of COVID protocols from within the city. Check that out. South Carolina State with 2 points, not ranked, as we said. Prairie View stays in the top 5. Prairie View A&M 2-0, 1 first place vote, 83 points. They do drop a spot from number 3. They continue to drop. They got to find a way to get on the field, or they're going to drop out of the top 5. At number 3, Alabama A&M Bulldogs. They dropped from the number 1 ranking this week, dropped 2 spots. 1-0. They still hold on to a first place vote, 84 points. Bring us to number 2, Southern Jaguars, 3 and 1 after that tough loss to Pine Bluff. They have rebounded and won 2 straight, 2 and 1 in the conference races. Their game against Jackson State was not a conference game. 4 first place votes, 109 points. They move up 3 spots from number 5. Very impressive this week. Also moving up 2 spots. First time this year, the Golden Lions finally roar of UAPB as they earn the number 1 ranking this week, 3 and 0. In terms of a hard-fought road victory against Mississippi Valley. They get it done, and they are number 1. So now it's heavy as the crown, as they are number 1. Can they hold on to it? Fighting for the championship to not only get a seeding in terms of winning the West, they have the head-to-head tiebreaker against Southern, so that's going in their favor. They got 2 left in terms of what we see left right now. And obviously, those are 2 home games against division foes in terms of what we'll look at there. So it'll be interesting with Texas Southern and Prairie View up next. We'll see what they do. Can they hold on? And obviously they're fighting for home field advantage for the SWAC championship. And we know, Carlos, what that home field advantage does for the last 2 teams in terms of your Southern Jaguars facing up against Alcorn, having to travel to play essentially a home game for Alcorn for a championship instead of a neutral site game, which was done previously. Let me go to Carlos first, since he's the visiting. What are your thoughts on this week, week number 6, Dr. Bill's 2020, spring 21 version of the HBC Major Division football poll ranking?
Well, I looked at it before the show, and I was trying to find a reason to maybe disagree, but I couldn't because Arkansas Pine Bluff, they have done something historic in the spring season. They came into A.W. Mumford Stadium. They defeated Southern University. They defeated Grambling State, who we now know and really have some. They've been struggling so much. And Southern losing to Arkansas Pine Bluff. A big win last week against Jackson State, before that against Texas Southern. So 1 and 2, couldn't disagree. Alabama A&M, wow. You would like to see more games get in, but it wasn't their fault. And for instance, I even thought about, say, maybe Alabama A&M number 2. Nah, Southern after that big victory against Jackson State. You have to leave them right there. And then Prairie View A&M, South Carolina State. Dr. Cavil, I tried. Hey, I can't disagree with that top 5. It's on point.
Yeah. See, Charles, that's why we bring such great intellectuals. Professor is what we want to have, because he got it right. You know, this is what happens. There's a professor, Professor Brown, teaching in the lecture lab this week, telling you why the poll rankings was right. Let me go to Charles and let him mix it up and see if he can tell us why it's not so right.
You know what? I can't argue with you. You know, when I looked at the poll, I thought to myself, boy, wouldn't Southern love to see UAP be right now?
Bring out the brooms, please.
Wouldn't Southern love to see the Golden Lions right now? Dawson Odom said something very interesting in the post-game presser where he mentioned kind of as the season goes along, Southern gets better. And it's so true. You know, if you stop and think about it, I'm going to be watching for that in the fall to see who Southern has in the month of September and, you know, who they, you know, get after September, because you better get them early, because if you don't get them early as they go toward, you know, back end of the season, you're in trouble. But, you know, this is a good poll. You know, Alabama A&M, unfortunately, they only have that one game under their belt. We at least get another data point, hopefully this weekend. Hopefully, you know, we cross our fingers and nothing bad happens with regards to getting this game. Yeah, exactly. So we get a chance to see Aquill Glass this weekend against Jackson State. They've been knocked on the heels a little bit. So whether they can fight back from some adversity remains to be seen. But I like this poll. This is a good poll. South Carolina State, that win against Alabama State and taking Ezra Gray out of the game, huge. So I like it. I'll go with it, Doc.
I appreciate it. I knew you had my back all the time. I knew you had my back in so many different ways. Shout out in many different ways to that. We're going to close it up. Thank you for listening to Inside HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop, as Carlos Brown was sitting in for Mike Washington as he was out on assignment. I want to say thank you for Carlos jumping on here and getting this done, as he's part of the HBCU Pro Sports Media Network that we're getting it done. So you'll see us bringing these media experts in and making sure they get a chance to share their love. Check him out every Saturday from 10 to 12. Every Saturday, the Carlos Brown Show. You see it right here behind him, and he gets it done. 2 hours, one of the few 2-hour slots out there discussing everything about HBCU sports. First hour, in a lot of ways, is dedicated to Southern, but now he even takes a deeper dive and brings in some great interviews. The interview that he has with Coach Petaway in so many is really fascinating in terms of experience. It is a gold mine right there. And then he brings in our favorite BJ Jones that shows up for us on Sundays, and he's going to give you some insight in terms of football. So he has it all the way down, and we give a lot of love to Carlos, and we tease him a little bit, but he brings it as well. So it's a great lineup, and then he'll bring in special guests here and there. And then you just talk about what he gets done and how he brings it. It's none other. I want to personally say thank you, because he gave me an opportunity to shine on the show many years ago that's kind of giving you what you got now in regards to how I bring it, giving me a chance to kind of shine. And then you have to give some love to Dr. Michael Prince in a lot of ways in terms of doing the production side on the backside. Give him credit as well. So with that, I want to say thank you. Hope you enjoyed our interview with Prentiss Hill, Erwin getting it done in terms of BCSG 360, in terms of the Black College World Series for the small division will be fascinating. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Ville's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, every Tuesday and Thursday, 6 o'clock. We look forward to next week as we will discuss the latest in the news in the lab. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Anything you want to say, Carlos?
Well, it's been a pleasure. You know, I watch the show all the time, and it's just been great, you know, being here. Dr. Cavil, we have a long relationship, doing some segments back in the day. Charles Bishop, it's always a pleasure to see him grow in the business. And I look back to when we used to have some special shows in Jackson.
Yes, indeed.
That was good. And Charles Bishop, Jackson State, he knows how I feel, but he is my favorite JSU alum. Just a great guy. I love him to death.
Appreciate that, Carlos. Same right back to you. You gave me an opportunity along with Dr. Michael Prince, so I'm always appreciative for everything that you've done in terms of this career of mine here with Dr. Cavil.
No doubt about it. I appreciate y'all sharing that for people to know the backstory. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, DrKenyattCavil, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Follow these gentlemen as well. That's DrKenyattCavil. Dream big. Continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Course. Charles.
Lecture.
Dismiss.